The text came at 3:47 a.m. while I was bleeding out in a Bangkok alley. My phone, resting on a dumpster lid next to my Glock, buzzed with an almost comical impertinence. I glanced at the screen, my vision blurring slightly from the blood loss or the humidity. I wasn't sure which. It was my wife, Sarah. The message was short, sweet, and to the point, just like the knife that had found a home in my side a few minutes earlier. Emergency. Need to use our Hawaii vacation days. Tom's dad had a heart attack. We'll explain later. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Here I was, applying pressure to a real, honest-to-God emergency, watching the life fade from the eyes of 3 men who'd made the fatal mistake of trafficking children on my watch. Sirens were a distant, mournful promise in the humid Thai night. And my wife, my darling Sarah, was cashing in our one chance at a real vacation in 5 years for her friend Tom. Again. Our Hawaii trip. 2 weeks. No phones, no work. Just sand, sun, and a desperate, last-ditch attempt to remember why we'd gotten married in the first place. For 15 years, I'd been a ghost. A whisper in the dark corners of the world, cleaning up messes governments preferred to deny. I was a black ops contractor, a polite term for a man who solves problems with a single, well-placed bullet. I'd given Sarah a life of quiet suburban luxury, a beautiful home she never had to worry about, financial security that was ironclad. All it cost me was pieces of my soul, sold off one mission at a time. All I asked for in return was her. But for the last 2 years, I hadn't had all of her. I'd had the parts she could spare when she wasn't propping up Tom Morrison, her perpetually needy, just-a-friend co-worker. The slow-motion car crash of our marriage played out in my head as I tied a strip of my ruined shirt around my waist, the pain a sharp, clarifying shock. Canceled dinners because Tom was having a panic attack. Our anniversary forgotten because Tom was suicidal after his divorce, leaving my own father's funeral early because Tom needed emotional support. Each time I'd swallowed my anger and played the understanding husband. Each time a little piece of me died. A death by 1,000 cuts. Each one justified with a gentle hand on my arm, and the words, "You know he's just a friend. He needs me right now." The 3 men on the ground weren't breathing anymore. My job here was done. The sirens were getting closer. I pushed myself to my feet, gritting my teeth against the fire in my side. I looked at my phone again, at her message. Tom's dad had a heart attack. Another convenient crisis. Another piece of my life handed over to another man. I'd spent my career creating exit strategies for high-value assets in hostile territories. It was time to create one for myself. I was done being understanding. Done being second place in my own marriage. Done watching my life bleed out, not in a Bangkok alley, but in the sterile quiet of my own home. Sarah could have her emergency. It was time for my own. An emergency exit. My name is Marcus Kane. I'm 38, and for a living, I make bad people disappear. It's a niche market, but business is booming. My reputation in the circles that matter is simple. They call me the cleaner. When a situation is FUBAR, when there's no diplomatic solution, when a government needs a problem to vanish without a trace, my handler gets a call. I go in, I complete the objective, and I melt away. No headlines, no witnesses, no loose ends. Tonight's objective was a human trafficking ring, operating out of a series of warehouses near the Chao Phraya River. 3 key players needed to be retired. Permanently. And so they were. Mission accomplished. The knife wound was an unexpected complication. A lucky shot from a dying man, but it was manageable. I was a professional. Pain was just a data point. The contradiction of my life was a bitter pill I choked down daily. I traveled the globe eliminating monsters, fighting for some semblance of justice in the darkest corners of humanity. I could face down a dozen armed men without my heart rate spiking, could plan an infiltration with surgical precision, could kill without hesitation. But I couldn't fix my own marriage. I could take out a cartel leader from 1,000 yards, but I couldn't get my wife to look at me the way she used to. As I limped towards my prearranged extraction point, my mind flashed back, as it often did, to the beginning, to how I met Sarah. It was 8 years ago. I was stateside, recovering from a mission in Chechnya that had gone sideways. I'd taken a few rounds to the leg and was laid up in a military hospital, angry at the world and stewing in my own misery. She was a trauma nurse. She walked into my room with a smile that could have disarmed a bomb, and eyes that saw past the scowl and the scars. She didn't flinch at the stories, the nightmares, the darkness that clung to me like a shroud. She saw the man underneath, or at least the man I wanted to be. "You're a terrible patient, you know that?" she'd said one day, changing the dressing on my leg with a gentleness I hadn't felt in years. "I'm not here to win awards," I'd grumbled. "No," she'd said, looking me straight in the eye. "You're here to heal. Let people help you." And for a while, I did. She helped me. She was my anchor, my light in the darkness. We fell in love with the kind of speed and intensity that only happens when two broken people find a way to fit their jagged pieces together. I thought I was healing. I thought we were building something real. Now, stumbling through the humid Bangkok night, I realized I'd just been trading one battlefield for another. Sarah's text wasn't an isolated incident. It was the closing statement in a long, drawn-out trial where I was both the plaintiff and the condemned. It was the final, undeniable data point in a pattern of behavior that, once I saw it, I couldn't unsee. The cancer in our marriage had a name. Tom Morrison. Sarah's co-worker. Recently divorced, perpetually on the verge of a breakdown, and, as far as I could tell, utterly incapable of managing his own life. He was a masterpiece of weaponized incompetence. The memories flooded in, each one a fresh twist of the knife in my side. Our 5th wedding anniversary. I'd booked a table at a Michelin star restaurant we'd been wanting to try for years. I was in my suit, the one she loved. She was in a stunning red dress. We were just about to leave when her phone rang. "Oh, Marcus, I'm so sorry," she'd said, her face a mask of concern. "It's Tom. His ex-wife just served him with papers for full custody. He's saying he wants to end it all. I have to go to him." "Sarah, it's our anniversary." "I know, baby, I know, and I feel terrible. But what if he does something? I could never live with myself. We'll celebrate tomorrow, I promise." We never did. Then there was my father's funeral. The hardest day of my life. I was delivering the eulogy, my voice cracking as I spoke about the man who taught me everything, when I saw her slip out of the pew. I found her in the lobby, phone pressed to her ear. "It's Tom," she whispered, her eyes pleading for understanding. "His dog got hit by a car. He's all alone at the vet. He's a wreck." "His dog?" I'd said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You're leaving my father's funeral for his dog?" "He doesn't have anyone else, Marcus. You have your family here. He has no one. Please, try to understand." I didn't understand. I stood there, watching my wife walk out on the memory of my father to comfort a man over his poodle. The pattern was everywhere. Missed dates, weekend plans torpedoed, late-night phone calls that she'd take in the other room. It was a slow, creeping realization that I was no longer the protagonist in my own life. I was a supporting character in the Tom Morrison story, starring my wife. I had slowly come to realize Sarah wasn't just helping a friend. She was living a double life, one where she was the noble, self-sacrificing savior, and I was the obstacle to her martyrdom. I made it to the extraction point, a grimy noodle shop in a back alley. My contact, a wiry old man named Chen, nodded once and pointed to a back room. Inside, a medic with unsteady hands but a surprising amount of skill stitched up my side without asking a single question. This was my world. Clean, transactional, emotionless. I was supposed to be on a plane back to the States in 6 hours, back to my beautiful home, back to Sarah, back to the quiet, simmering resentment and the polite fictions we told ourselves. Instead, I took out my burner phone and made a call to my handler, a man known only as Control. He was less a person and more a disembodied voice on a secure line, the architect of my professional life. "Kane," he answered, no preamble. "The Bangkok job is done, all targets neutralized," I said, my voice flat. "Acknowledged. Your flight details are unchanged. Your payment has been transferred." I took a deep breath. "There's been a change of plans, Control." A long pause on the other end. Control did not like changes of plans. "Explain." "I'm going dark," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, like a foreign language. It was the nuclear option, a protocol we'd established years ago for a scenario so catastrophic I'd never actually believed I'd use it. "Initiate the Phoenix Protocol, effective immediately." Another, longer pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating the fallout. Losing an asset like me was not insignificant. "Are you compromised, Kane?" "Only personally," I said, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Consider this my resignation. It's been a pleasure." I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call and smashed the phone on the concrete floor. The Phoenix Protocol was now in motion. Within the hour, Marcus Kane, the contractor, would cease to exist. A ghost plane would file a flight plan under my name and then vanish over the Pacific. My offshore accounts, the ones Sarah knew nothing about, would be emptied and wired to a series of untraceable shell corporations. My digital footprint would be scrubbed from existence. I took out my personal phone, the one Sarah called me on. I looked at her last message one more time. "We'll explain later." I knew the explanation. It would be a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, designed to make me feel guilty for even questioning her. I typed out a single reply. "Enjoy your vacation days. I'm taking mine permanently." I hit send. Then I pulled the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped the pieces into a cup of lukewarm tea. The medic finished his work. I paid him in cash, and he disappeared back into the city. Chen handed me a backpack with a change of clothes, a passport with a new name, and a bundle of cash. My old life was over, but I wasn't ready to start a new one just yet, not until I'd seen the fallout from the old one. My last act as Marcus Kane would be to set up surveillance on my own home. I needed to see it. I needed to know just how deep the betrayal went. It was time to become a ghost in my own life. 2 weeks later, I was no longer Marcus Kane. I was Michael Cole, a freelance photographer with a penchant for urban landscapes. My new base of operations was a sterile, soulless rental apartment on the 3rd floor of a building directly across the street from my own house, the one I'd bought with Sarah, the one where we were supposed to grow old. From my window, with a high-powered telephoto lens, I had a perfect, heartbreaking view into my own life. The first few days were a study in performative grief. Sarah told friends and family who called that I was on another last-minute business trip. Her voice laced with the perfect blend of weary resignation and dutiful support. She was good. I had to give her that. She played the part of the lonely, devoted wife beautifully. But the performance was only for the public. When the curtains were drawn, the real show began. On the 3rd night, Tom's car pulled into my driveway. He didn't just drop her off. He walked in with an overnight bag. He never left. I watched them through my lens, my knuckles white as I gripped the camera. I watched them cook dinner in my kitchen, laughing as they splashed sauce on each other. I watched them drink my best single malt scotch on the patio I built with my own 2 hands. And then the final gut-wrenching betrayal. I watched them go upstairs into my bedroom. My bedroom. I didn't need to see what happened next. The light going off was confirmation enough. He was sleeping in my bed. My rage was a living thing, a cold, heavy presence in my chest. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a jealous husband. It was the patient, calculating fury of a predator. I had spent my life channeling my rage into my work, focusing it on targets, on objectives. Now the target was the man living in my house, and the objective was to understand the full scope of the lie that had consumed my life. Sarah's narrative to the outside world remained consistent. "Marcus is unreachable," she'd say on the phone, her voice a pitch-perfect symphony of concern. "These trips, they're getting harder and harder on us." She was laying the groundwork, building a public case for the eventual dissolution of our marriage. She wasn't just cheating. She was executing a plan. I watched Tom get comfortable. He started wearing my clothes. I saw him in my favorite gray Henley, the one Sarah always said made my eyes look bluer. He started mowing my lawn, checking my mail, taking out my trash cans. He wasn't just a guest. He was auditioning for my role. And Sarah, she blossomed. Without me there, without the weight of my silent disapproval and the darkness I carried, she seemed lighter, happier. The slow, creeping dread in my gut solidified into a hard, cold certainty. She hadn't been trying to save our marriage in Hawaii. She'd been placating me, keeping me on the hook until she and Tom were ready to make their move. The vacation she'd stolen wasn't for his father's emergency. It was for their future. I sat in the dark, my camera my only companion, and I watched them play house with the ruins of my life. The cleaner had a new mission, and this time it was personal. Patience is a virtue. In my line of work, it's a survival trait. I didn't act on my rage. I cataloged it, refined it, and used it as fuel. For the next week, I transitioned from watcher to investigator. My rented apartment became a command center. Using a secure satellite internet connection and the considerable skills I'd acquired over the years, I started digging into the life of Tom Morrison. It didn't take long to dismantle the facade. His father, the one who'd supposedly had the massive vacation-canceling heart attack? I found him on Facebook. Frank Morrison, 68 years old, alive and well, and posting pictures from a fishing trip in the Florida Keys. The timestamp on the photos was from the exact day Sarah sent me that text. There was no heart attack. There was no emergency. It was a calculated lie. I hacked into Tom's financials. The man was a walking disaster. He was drowning in debt. Credit cards, personal loans, a gambling problem that he'd managed to keep hidden from everyone. His divorce hadn't just been emotionally taxing. It had wiped him out financially. His ex-wife's lawyers had taken him to the cleaners. He was desperate. Then I dug deeper, into his past. I used back channels to pull his employment records, his sealed juvenile files, anything I could find. A pattern emerged. Tom had a history. At his last 2 jobs, he had attached himself to married female colleagues, always under the guise of friendship, always during a time of personal crisis. Both women eventually left their husbands. Both relationships with Tom imploded shortly after. Once it became clear he was more parasite than partner. He wasn't just a sad sack. He was a predator. He targeted compassionate, stable women like Sarah, and used their empathy as a tool to pry them away from their lives. He was a professional homewrecker. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I gained access to his text messages. Not with Sarah, but with a friend of his, a fellow degenerate named Rick. Tom. Dude, I'm in. The house is insane. This guy Kane is loaded. Rick. She finally ditching him? Tom. Almost there, playing the long game. She thinks he's just distant, LOL. Another month or two and she'll be ready to file. Half of everything is mine. Her idea, not mine. I'm just the supportive friend. Rick, you're a legend, man. Just don't get her pregnant, LOL. Tom, not a chance. I ain't that stupid. My blood ran cold. Her idea, not mine. This wasn't just Tom manipulating her. They were partners. This was a conspiracy. Sarah, my Sarah, the gentle trauma nurse who saved me, was actively plotting to dismantle my life and take half of everything I had bled for. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a long con. And I had been the mark. The last text from Tom to his friend was the one that sealed his fate. It was about his drug use, a casual mention of scoring some cocaine to celebrate the win. I now had everything I needed. I knew his weaknesses, his secrets, his plan. The Watcher had become the Hunter. The game had changed. And Tom Morrison had no idea he was already in my crosshairs. Just when I thought the betrayal couldn't possibly cut any deeper, it did. The universe, it seems, has a dark sense of humor. I had a listening device planted in their car, a simple bug I'd attached one night while Tom was inside paying for gas. Most of their conversations were nauseatingly domestic, filled with plans for my house and critiques of my taste in furniture. But one conversation changed everything. It was Sarah. Her voice was hesitant, nervous. Tom, we need to talk. What's up, babe? You seem stressed. His voice was casual, dismissive. I'm late. A pause. Late for what? Work? No, Tom, she said, her voice strained with frustration. Late. My period. I'm 6 weeks late. I took a test this morning. It was positive. The silence in the car was deafening, even over my cheap audio feed. I felt the air leave my own lungs. Pregnant. Sarah was pregnant. For a split second, a chaotic, irrational thought flared in my mind. A baby, a child, something to fix this, something to anchor us. It was the desperate, dying gasp of the man I used to be. Then Tom spoke, and reality came crashing back down. Whoa, okay, positive, wow. He didn't sound happy. He sounded like a man who'd just been handed a bill he couldn't pay. Are you sure it's, Of course it's yours, Tom. Who else's would it be? She snapped. Then her voice softened, became pleading. Marcus and we haven't been together like that in almost a year. You know that. A lie. A bald-faced lie. We had slept together about 10 weeks ago. A desperate, joyless attempt at connection after one of my trips. I remembered it vividly. It was the last time. Right, of course, Tom said quickly, recovering. Okay, wow, a baby. That's great news, babe. Really? He was lying. I could hear it in his voice. But Sarah, my brilliant, perceptive Sarah, couldn't. Or didn't want to. The conversation continued, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing. My baby? His baby? The timeline was tight. It was possible. It was also possible it was his. The uncertainty was a special kind of hell. I couldn't operate on uncertainty. I needed facts. I needed the truth. My surveillance became laser-focused. I needed a DNA sample, from Tom and from the fetus. Getting Tom's was easy. I watched him drink a beer on the patio and toss the bottle into the recycling bin. That night, I retrieved it, carefully bagging it. Getting Sarah's was harder, more invasive. I intercepted a call she made to an OB/GYN, scheduling her first appointment. They mentioned they'd be doing a non-invasive prenatal test, a simple blood draw from her that could determine paternity with near-perfect accuracy. Getting that blood sample was out of the question, but getting the results? That was in my wheelhouse. A little social engineering, a clerical error at the lab's third-party billing service, and a misdirected email later. The PDF of the lab results was sitting in my encrypted inbox. I opened the file, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrolled past the hormonal levels and the chromosomal analysis until I found the section I was looking for. Paternity analysis. Alleged father 1. Sample provided by patient. Marcus Kane. Alleged father 2. Sample provided by lab. Thomas Morrison. Result: the paternity of Thomas Morrison is confirmed with a probability of 99.999%. Conclusion: Marcus Kane is excluded as the biological father. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together. It wasn't mine. The baby wasn't mine. And Sarah had listed me as a potential father. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. She wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to him, too. She was keeping me in the picture as a fallback, an insurance policy. If Tom bailed, she could pass the baby off as mine. She'd have me, my support, my money. If he stayed, she'd have the life she wanted with him. She was playing us both. This was no longer a story of a woman manipulated by a predator. This was a story of two predators hunting the same prey. And the prey had just realized he was a hunter himself. Sarah wasn't a victim. She was a co-conspirator, an active, willing participant in my destruction. The rage I'd felt before was a flickering candle compared to the inferno that now consumed me. My mission was no longer about revenge. It was about extermination. I was going to burn their entire world to the ground. The time for watching was over. It was time to play. My training wasn't just in weapons and demolitions. It was in psyops, psychological operations, the art of making your enemy defeat himself. Tom Morrison was about to enroll in my masterclass. My first move was subtle. I started with paranoia. I bought a cheap disposable phone and a dozen roses. I sent them to my house, addressed to Sarah. The card was simple. Thinking of you. Can't wait to see you again. M. Not me, of course. Just an ambiguous M. I watched through my lens as Tom brought the flowers in. I saw the questions in his eyes, the slight stiffening of his posture. I saw him watch Sarah as she read the card, her face a mixture of confusion and, I hoped, a flicker of fear. "Who's he asked, his voice tight. "I have no idea," she said, and for once I believed her. It must be a mistake, but the seed was planted. Next, I targeted his fragile ego. I knew from my intel that he was up for a promotion at work. He'd been bragging about it to Sarah. I also knew his presentation was on a company server. A little late-night hacking, a few corrupted files, a server glitch that specifically targeted his work. And his big presentation was wiped clean 12 hours before he was due to give it. I listened to the frantic, screaming phone call he had with his IT department. I watched him pace the living room, a man unraveling. He bombed the presentation, of course. The promotion went to someone else. Then I orchestrated the accidents. A nail, perfectly placed in the sidewall of his tire, causing a slow leak that made him late for a dinner with Sarah's parents. A misdelivered package containing expensive lingerie, not Sarah's size, that arrived with his name on it. A faked email from a dating site sent to his work address, which I knew his boss occasionally monitored. Each incident was a small cut, a tiny destabilizing push. To Sarah, Tom was suddenly becoming unreliable, unlucky, and strangely secretive. He was defensive and accusatory. "Where were you last night?" he'd demand. "I was with my sister. I told you that," she'd reply, her voice rising. "What about these flowers? Who is M? Are you seeing someone else?" "This is crazy, Tom. You're the one getting emails from dating sites." Their arguments became more frequent, more vicious. The happy couple playing house was gone, replaced by two stressed, suspicious people trapped in a web of my making. Tom, already on a knife's edge from his financial troubles, started leaning more heavily on his cocaine habit. His eyes were wild, his movements jerky. The charming, supportive friend was vanishing, and in his place, a paranoid, abusive addict was emerging. Sarah was seeing it. I could see the doubt in her eyes, the fear. She was watching her perfect new life crumble before it had even begun. She was seeing the real Tom Morrison, the one I wanted her to see. I was the ghost in their machine, the phantom pulling the strings, and I was just getting started. The final act was about to begin. It was time for Marcus Kane to die. I used my old handler Control for one last off-the-books favor. It cost me a significant portion of my remaining untraceable funds, but it was worth it. He owed me for years of silent, loyal service, and he was a man who understood the value of a clean slate. The setup was perfect. A small charter plane, officially carrying a single passenger, Marcus Kane, on a business trip to consult on a mining operation in a volatile part of Indonesia. The plane would go down in a remote, mountainous region. The wreckage would be found, but the terrain was too treacherous for a full recovery effort. I would be declared missing, presumed dead. It was a clean, tragic, and most importantly, undeniable end. I watched online as the news broke. It was a minor story, barely a blip on the international news cycle. Small plane crash in Southeast Asia, American businessman missing. The official notification came to Sarah via 2 stone-faced representatives from the State Department. I watched them walk up my front path. I watched her open the door. I watched her face collapse as they delivered the news. Her grief, from my vantage point, looked surprisingly genuine. Tears streamed down her face. She stumbled back into the house, into Tom's waiting arms. For a moment, a flicker of the old me felt a pang of something akin to guilt. But then I remembered the baby, the lies, the conspiracy. Her tears weren't for me, the man. They were for the life she had lost, the comfortable security I provided. A week later, her lawyer called. Marcus Kane was dead, and she was a widow, a very, very wealthy widow. But I had one last surprise for them. I'd amended my will a month prior, using a discreet lawyer in a different state. The new will was read to Sarah and Tom over a conference call, with me listening in on a hacked line. To my wife, Sarah Kane, the lawyer read in a dry monotone, I leave my entire estate, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets. I could hear Tom's sharp intake of breath. He was probably already spending the money in his head. However, the lawyer continued, and this was the beautiful part, the assets are to be held in the Kane Legacy Trust. Funds will be dispersed to the beneficiary, Sarah Kane, under the following conditions. The lawyer then laid out the trap. 1. A monthly stipend sufficient for living expenses will be provided. 2. Larger capital disbursements for investments or major purchases will require a unanimous vote of approval from the Trust's board. I had appointed the board myself, my estranged, hard-as-nails brother, my pit bull of a lawyer, and Control, listed under a pseudonym. Getting them to agree on anything would be impossible. 3, the lawyer said, delivering the killing blow. All disbursements are contingent upon the beneficiary providing a quarterly, notarized affidavit confirming she has remained faithful to the memory of her deceased husband and is not engaged in a romantic cohabitation. Furthermore, a clean toxicology report from a lab of the Trust's choosing is required to be submitted alongside the affidavit. Silence. The beautiful, perfect, soul-crushing silence of a trap sprung. I had them. I had given Sarah everything she wanted, but wrapped it in barbed wire. She could have a comfortable life, but not the lavish one Tom had been promised. To get the real money, the life-changing money, she had to get rid of him, and if she stayed with him, his drug use would make it impossible to get a cent. She had to choose. The man she'd destroyed her life for, or the money she'd killed me to get. I knew Tom. I knew which one he'd force her to pick. The clock was ticking on their perfect little life. The aftermath of the will reading was exactly what I'd predicted. It was glorious. The financial pressure acted as an accelerant on the fire I'd already started. The arguments, once sporadic, became a daily occurrence. My listening devices paid for themselves 100 times over. "What do you mean we can't access the money?" Tom's voice was a low growl. I pictured him pacing my living room, my scotch in his hand. "It's complicated, Tom. It's in a trust," Sarah explained, her voice weary. "There are conditions." "What conditions? It's your money. He left it to you." "He left it to his widow, a faithful widow, who doesn't live with another man and who doesn't do drugs." The accusation hung in the air between them. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" he snarled. "You think this is my fault?" "I just think it's a complication." The mask didn't just slip. Tom tore it off and stomped on it. The charming, supportive partner was gone, replaced by a desperate, abusive bully. The verbal abuse escalated. He called her stupid, naive. He blamed her for not seeing this coming, for not having a better plan. "You were supposed to handle this," he screamed one night. "You said he was checked out, that it would be a simple divorce. Half. That was the deal." "There was no deal," she cried back. "I loved you. I chose you. You chose a broke guy living in his dead husband's house. Congratulations, we're screwed." His drug use, no longer a recreational habit, became a constant. He was burning through his own meager savings to fund it. He became sloppy, leaving baggies and rolled-up bills on the kitchen counter. Sarah, the trauma nurse who'd spent her career dealing with addicts, could no longer ignore the truth. She was living with one. She tried to get him to stop. She pleaded, she cried, she threatened. Nothing worked. He was a cornered animal, and he was lashing out at the only person left in his cage. One evening, I watched the worst of it. An argument over money escalated until he grabbed her arm hard. She cried out, trying to pull away. He shoved her, and she stumbled back, catching herself on the edge of the kitchen island. Her face was a mask of pure shock and terror. This was the man she left me for. This was the man whose child she was carrying. This was the man she believed was her future. She had made her bed, and now he was setting it on fire. It was almost time for me to step out of the shadows and hand her the extinguisher, or maybe just another can of gasoline. The final confrontation needed the right stage. I chose a rainy Tuesday night, 2 months after my death. I knew Tom's dealer was coming by. I knew Tom was high, agitated, and on the ragged edge of sanity. I let myself into my own house with the key I'd always kept hidden under the loose stone by the back porch. They never found it. They never even thought to look. The house was a mess. Dirty dishes in the sink, empty bottles on the counter. A thin layer of dust covered everything. My house. My pristine, orderly house. It felt violated. I walked silently through the downstairs, a ghost in my own home. I could hear them upstairs, in the master bedroom, arguing. His voice was loud, slurred. Hers was a low, pleading murmur. I waited in the living room, in the dark, sitting in my favorite leather armchair. I didn't turn on a light. I just sat there, a patient predator, and waited for them to come to me. It was Sarah who came down first. She was crying. She walked into the living room, heading for the front door, probably to get some air, to escape him. She flicked on a lamp and saw me. She froze. The scream died in her throat, strangled by disbelief. Her face went white, her eyes wide with a terror that was deeper than anything I had seen before. It wasn't just the shock of seeing a dead man. It was the sudden, horrifying understanding of what his presence meant. "Marcus?" she whispered, the name a ghost on her lips. "Hello, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and even. "You look surprised to see me." Before she could answer, Tom came thundering down the stairs. "Sarah, where the hell do you think you're—" He stopped dead at the bottom of the staircase, his drug-fueled rage melting into pure, unadulterated fear. He stared at me, his mouth hanging open. What the hell?" he stammered. "Tom," I said, standing up slowly, "I believe you're in my chair, in my house, with my wife." I let the words hang in the air, each one a hammer blow. "We have a lot to talk about." The trap was sprung, the actors were on stage, and the ghost, the puppet master, the man they had killed and buried, was back to direct the final bloody act. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words, a toxic cocktail of fear, guilt, and disbelief. Sarah was rooted to the spot, her hand over her mouth, her eyes darting between me and Tom. Tom, on the other hand, was vibrating with a paranoid energy, his mind clearly struggling to process the impossible. "This is a trick," he finally spat out, his eyes wild. "You hired someone who looks like him. You're trying to screw me out of the money." He pointed a shaking finger at Sarah. "It's him, you idiot," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "It's really him." I took a step forward, into the center of the room. "She's right, Tom. The reports of my death were, as they say, greatly exaggerated. It's amazing what you can accomplish with the right resources." I let my gaze settle on him. "I know everything. The heart attack. The plan to take half in the divorce. The lies, the drugs." I paused, then looked pointedly at Sarah's stomach. "Even the secrets you're keeping from each other." That hit home. Tom's head whipped around to look at Sarah. "What's he talking about? What secrets?" Sarah just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, please." "Please what, Sarah?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Please don't tell him you listed me as the potential father on the hospital forms? That you were keeping me as your backup plan? Your golden parachute in case Captain Wonderful here decided to bail?" Tom's face contorted in a mask of rage. "You what?" he screamed at her. "You were playing me too?" "It wasn't like that," she sobbed. "I was scared." "Oh, you should be," I said. This was the moment, the breaking point. Cornered, exposed, and high as a kite, Tom reverted to his most basic, pathetic instincts. He lunged, not at me, but at Sarah. He grabbed her, pulling her in front of him as a shield. "Stay back," he yelled, his voice cracking. And then he did something truly stupid. He reached behind him and pulled a small, cheap-looking pistol from the waistband of his jeans. The entire dynamic of the room shifted. The domestic drama was over. This was my world now. My body moved before my mind had a chance to catch up. Years of training, of muscle memory, took over. Tom was clumsy, his movements telegraphed. As he raised the gun, I closed the distance in 2 steps. My left hand shot out, grabbing his wrist, twisting it outward with a sickening crack of bone. The gun clattered to the floor. His scream was high-pitched, pathetic. My right hand came up, the edge of my palm striking the side of his neck, right on the vagus nerve. His eyes rolled back in his head. His body went limp, slumping to the floor in a boneless heap. He was unconscious before he even realized what had happened. It was over in less than 3 seconds. Surgical, precise, clean. Silence descended on the room again, broken only by Sarah's ragged gasps. She stared down at Tom's unconscious form, then up at me. The fear in her eyes was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, awe. A dawning, horrifying understanding of the man she had married. She had seen glimpses of the darkness in me, had felt its cold shadow, but she had never seen the monster itself unleashed. Now she had. The question was, could we ever put it back in its cage, or had her betrayal let it out for good? With Tom's inert form lying on the floor between us, the house fell into a profound silence. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind the cold, hard wreckage of our lives. Sarah stared at me, not as her husband, not as a ghost, but as a stranger. A terrifyingly capable stranger who had just dismantled her entire world with the chilling efficiency of a bomb disposal expert. You planned all of it, she whispered, the realization dawning. The flowers, Tom losing his promotion, the will, my death. I nodded slowly, my face unreadable. Every last detail. I needed you to see him for what he really was. I needed the world you chose to crumble around you so you could see what you had thrown away. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up a photo album. Our wedding album. I tossed it onto the sofa next to her. Remember this? In sickness and in health. For richer, for poorer. Forsaking all others. I let the words hang in the air. Those were your vows, Sarah, not suggestions. I began to pace, the puppet master revealing the full extent of his stage. I watched you. For months, I saw everything. I saw him move in. I saw him wear my clothes, drink my scotch, sleep in our bed. Her face crumpled, and she began to sob in earnest. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs of a person who has finally understood the true depth of their failure. But the worst part, I continued, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper, the part that I can't get out of my head, was the lie about the baby. I stopped in front of her, forcing her to look at me. You were going to let me raise another man's child. You were going to let me love him, provide for him, all while knowing he wasn't mine. You weren't just leaving me, Sarah. You were planning to colonize the rest of my life with your betrayal. That's a special kind of evil. The paternity of the child was the true moral event horizon. It was a line from which there was no return, only a new, terrifying reality. For her, it was the consequence of her actions, a living, breathing symbol of her deceit. For me, it was a constant, visceral reminder of why I had become this man, this cold, calculating strategist. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice barely audible. It was the question of a prisoner to her jailer. She was finally acknowledging the truth of her situation. She had no power here, no leverage. She was entirely at my mercy. First, I said, nudging Tom's unconscious body with my foot, we take out the trash. I held all the cards. I had the truth, the money, the skills to make anyone disappear, but as I looked at my weeping, broken wife, carrying the child of the man I had just felled, I felt a flicker of the man I used to be, the man who loved her. And that flicker complicated everything. I was her judge, her jury, and her executioner. But a part of me was still her husband, and I had no idea what to do with that. I made a single phone call. Within the hour, 2 quiet, efficient men arrived at the house. They bundled Tom's unconscious body into the trunk of an unassuming sedan and drove away. There was no paperwork, no questions asked. I gave them a destination. A private, long-term psychiatric facility in a state with lax patient rights. Tom Morrison would wake up in a padded room with a new name and a diagnosis of drug-induced psychosis. He would never be heard from again. He was simply gone. Another mess cleaned up. When they had left, I turned back to Sarah. She hadn't moved from the sofa. She was a statue of grief and fear. Now for us, I said, pulling a chair from the dining room and sitting down opposite her. The old rules are dead. Our marriage, the one we had, is dead. It died the first time you chose him over me. She flinched but said nothing. But the law says we are still married, I continued, and you are carrying a child. So we have 2 options. Option 1, divorce. You'll walk away with nothing but the child you're carrying. The trust will be dissolved, and my assets will be protected. I will disappear, for real this time, and you will be on your own. You will never see or hear from me again. I let that sink in. The reality of being a single mother with no job, no money, and no prospects. Option 2, I said, leaning forward, my voice dropping, is that we stay married, but under new rules. My rules. What? What rules? She whispered. Rule 1. Absolute, unflinching honesty, at all times. You will never lie to me again, not even by omission. I have ways of knowing, Sarah. Do not test me. Rule 2. You will sever all ties with your past life. The friends who enabled you, the places you went with him. It's all gone. Your life is here, in this house, with me. Rule 3. The child, you will carry it to term. When it is born, we will raise it. It will carry my name. It will know me as its father. And you will never, ever speak of its true paternity to anyone, including the child itself. As far as the world is concerned, it is mine. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark, quiet street. This isn't a negotiation, Sarah. This isn't about forgiveness. Forgiveness is off the table. This is about control. You manipulated me. You used my love and my trust as weapons against me. Now the power has shifted. You will be the devoted wife. You will be the loving mother. You will play your part, just as I played mine as the loyal, unsuspecting husband. I turned back to her. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the man who bled in a Bangkok alley, pining for a stolen vacation. I was the architect of her new reality, a gilded cage I had built around her. I had used my skills, my darkness, to win back my life. But in doing so, I had become the very thing I despised. A manipulator, a puppet master. Sarah looked at me, her eyes holding a universe of pain and regret. She was looking at the monster she had created. She had a choice to make, a life of lonely poverty or a life of comfortable subjugation, freedom with nothing or a prison of everything. Her answer hung in the silent, broken space between us, a final, ambiguous question mark at the end of our twisted love story.